Welcome to Masters of Color, brought to you by lowpost.com and ravengrade.com. I'm your host, Cullen Kelly, and my guest today is Aurora Gordon, senior colorist at Arsenal Effects Color. Rory is one of the most thoughtful and knowledgeable colorists I know, and in addition to her extensive resume, grading shows like The Tick, Bones, and Counterpart, she's also a published author and image scientist with some fascinating ideas about the way we create and experience motion images. We have got a great conversation in store for you today. This episode is sponsored by pixelview.io, an affordable streaming solution for editors and colorists. It's an all-in-one solution that just works. Simply plug in the encoder and start streaming. Your client can watch directly from their web browser for a quick review, or they can download the iPhone, iPad, or Apple TV app for a more color-accurate experience. You can use promo code MASTER to get a 15% discount on a hardware encoder at pixelview.io. And now, let's get to my conversation with Aurora Gordon. Rory!
Hey, Cullen.
Good morning to you.
Good morning to you. How you doing?
All is good. How's it going with you?
Pretty solid. It's been a beautiful weekend.
Well, thanks so much for joining me this morning. I'm so excited to talk color stuff with you.
Yeah, likewise.
Yeah, so, one of the reasons that I wanted to have this chat with you is, in addition to being an incredibly accomplished colorist doing like awesome work for a bunch of really great TV shows for Lovecraft Country and Counterpart, Waco, The Good Doctor, The Tick, all these awesome shows. You're one of the smartest people about our craft in terms of talking about it and moving the craft forward and thinking about new frontiers like HDR and kind of like where we're going next. And you just have a really interesting way of communicating about these things, and that's extended now into authoring several papers that I'm aware of.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah. So I just am so excited to hear you talk about not only your practice as a colorist, but some of the ideas and concepts that you've developed and shared with our community over the last several years.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, they're definitely connected. I feel like indulging in a side of my brain that's very, very analytical, and indulging in calculations, like the joy of the joy of understanding the machine is equal to the joy of understanding the soul and the purpose of being in the room and the purpose of the story of the color itself. I feel like I can enjoy them very separately, but they feed into each other. Like when I've had a day where it's like, I really want to, get in under the hood of this thing and understand like, what's this function doing? Then the next time I go into the bay, I'm like, oh, all this groundwork has been laid in this precise way. And now I just get to like turn on my creative brain and just like fly because I have such confidence in the processes that are the building blocks of the tool that I'm using. And I think I'm less frustrated when things crash and go wrong too, when I
Yeah.
having knowledge of like, okay, all right, so the threads are caught up right now because I hit enter like 3 times because I was pissed.
Well, I know exactly what you mean, and I feel very much the same way, and our sort of like intermittent one-off little like chats that we'll exchange about topics like both of us, that when we go down these rabbit trails of like, what is that doing? How do I understand that better? And I really enjoy our intermittent chats where one of us will ping the other, and it's clear that one of us is on such a mission of like, I want to get a little further under the skin of what's going on with this thing or that thing. I totally agree.
I trust people that ask questions. I trust people that are like, I don't understand this. That makes me just inherently gravitate towards people. I think you're one of those folks as well. That's like, I don't understand this. And you know what? I just haven't done it yet. So I want to learn about it.
Yeah, no, it's so true. I was just talking with some students yesterday about it's not unique to our craft as colorists. It's anybody doing anything. One of the biggest barriers to growth and to maturing in our field is when there's this pressure to know stuff already or to appear to know stuff, as opposed to just being sort of perpetually curious, as you say, and being fully willing to cop to like, I'm not sure I do understand that, or like, I thought I did, but maybe there's more to it than I was quite getting before this. So like, let's figure it out, like it's such a fun part of the journey if you let it be.
Yeah, truly the best, most talented, most expert, most disciplined people I know are always the ones to say, I don't know, let me think about that or look that up first.
Yes, absolutely. All right, so I want to start at the beginning, and then we're going to go off into outer space really fast because I've got so many questions to ask you.
Okay.
So let's start with the basics. How did you learn your craft? How did you get into color? How did you pick up your skills?
Yeah, so I went to Rochester Institute of Technology. I got in first to their digital science. I think it was called Digital Cinema program, and now I think it's Motion Picture and Science. But then I also got into the film school, and that's like always such a funny fork in the road to me to think back, like, oh, I got a BFA at RIT, but there's like an alternate reality universe where I'm running around with a BS instead. I mean, I'm running around with BS no matter what.
Is that what your counterpart is doing right now?
My counterpart is like, just running around, just building models left and right. And I think is also very happy. It's like, I think a little bit of a superpower to both love analysis and inspiration equally, because it's like, oh, I could be happy. And that's, so when to get back to like my path, my biggest, I think the biggest fork for me getting into, I always loved color. I had a basement darkroom when I was, a kid in Oklahoma. And I was just talking to somebody else about this recently. Actually, my dad, my grandfather, and my great-grandfather were all jewelers. And so that involves rating diamonds for clarity and color. So that isn't like, I do think that there's some sort of like family proclivity towards being interested in light, especially because, not the most important thing in diamonds actually before color is cut, because that changes how the light is refracted inside the stone.
Wow.
So yeah, I mean, like a good cut will make a stone really shine. And I'm saying this like I've had any like practice in gemology. I've never worked in a jewelry store aside from, like cleaning out my dad's closets when I was a child. But anyway, I do, I love light as a medium, I think. So, when I went to RIT, I took a lot of photo material and processes classes, and I took a little bit of color classes. I just didn't, at that point, I certainly didn't realize it was quite a career path that was like, oh, that's definitely something I can get into. RIT is also right up near Kodak, so I had the pleasure of working on one of the Kodak Vision 3 test shoots, and got to chat with the engineers, one of the chemical engineers, talk to me about grain structure, and that was such an incredible shoot. God. Like also Fred Murphy shot that, so like at the same time at the wrap party I was talking to this engineer, and during the shoot, like they gave me a little Aton A minima, and we're like, here, run around and do some like behind the scenes stuff, and Fred Murphy's like, here, like you want to get your center of gravity low, and like giving me feedback on like my operating. But when I got to LA, I quickly realized I do not have the phenotype to be on set. I'm not good at it. I love imagery, but man, I cannot stand around for 12 hours. I'm not good at that. And like, I think being in the camera department, part of that is like being able to be like super calm, and like every time anyone needs something, like just like, swipe in there and give it like where it's an apple box or an eyebrow or some sort of piece of, but I'm too, like, I can do that in post-production in a dark room all day long, but on set it was just like, this doesn't work for me. So there was a dailies facility that was looking for operators, and I had on my resume as a joke for years superior color vision, because I do have superior color vision. One of the lab assignments at RIT was like, here, test your color vision with the Munsell cap test. And so I, had done that. And the guy that was hiring me saw like, oh, superior color vision and photography. Are you interested in color at all? And I was like, yeah, I think that could, that definitely. And kind of immediately I was like, oh, this is an inroad. This is this would, if I do work nights for a while and sit in and shadow people, I shadowed the guy that built, Mark Sanford, who built their Dailies color facility, and he's a video controller. So that's, learning about signal from somebody that has been in the business for 30 years, just the actual processing of signal, in addition to watching the color room set up, I think gave me a pretty versatile, like really solid base of like, here are the concerns with digital imaging. Here are some of the really common pitfalls. Here's how you set up the workflow. But I worked 8 months or so as a dailies operator, and at the same time was training on color. And I just got a show. There was a DP that was like, I think that came in and was like, yeah, I think I'm comfortable with you doing dailies color. Which is kind of dumb luck, just to snare a client like that. But very quickly after that, Randy Starnes at Colorworks, my shows were being finished by him, and he was like, "Do you wanna come over so I can tell you everything that you're doing wrong?" And I was like, "Oh." Yeah, that would be great. And was just really humble about everything. Again, like Randy's somebody that has like years of experience on the creative side, actually working with clients and keeping them happy. And at the end of the day, even though it is an extremely technical job, the thing that matters is that they're happy with the way the picture looks. So yeah, I did dailies for a few years, I think about 5 years. And then I've been a senior colorist for the last 7 or so. No, that's not right. I mean, I was assisting with Randy and Larry at Arsenal for 3 years or so, and then 3 or 4 years, and then I don't know. I always get so tied up in one of those people that like I can't talk through a story until I get the timeline correct.
Well, there's a lot of chapters in there.
There's a lot of chapters in there. And I try to tell the most abridged version possible. I love light. That's the abridged version. And I was very eager to learn a craft, and just like, I'm just one of those people that like, I love just showing up for a job and doing good work. I think anything can be really a big, beautiful piece of the puzzle. Especially, I think there's something about just the dedication to something specific and being narrow in your knowledge, but very deep about it. So I found, I've just pushed towards the people that have let me do that.
Oh, how cool. Yeah. One of my favorite expressions is that an expert is someone who knows more and more about less and less.
Yeah, for sure.
I think there are so many interesting insights in your thumbnail synopsis that you just gave us, including like embracing, both your analytical and your creative leanings. Like from the very outset, it seems like you were kind of straddling both of those sides, like the scientific and the artistic, or, however you want to define that, what we typically think of as a dichotomy in this craft. And what I know that I, like you, share a feeling that they actually are symbiotic and feed off of one another. So that seems like an amazing takeaway. The other one would just be like, that sounds like a pretty pivotal moment, the way you chose to reply to Randy when he said, "Hey, come over and I'm going to set you straight," that you were like humble about it, instead of like, "Who the hell is this guy? I'll figure it out all on my own. I got this. Like, I don't need anybody's help." That seems like that was ended up being a pretty pivotal moment for your career, since you're now working with Randy, and you've learned so much from him and collaborated with him so much over the years.
Yeah. And it's definitely, now that I'm getting to the point where I'm working with the young people that are training and getting started, it's something that like, I think you can sense that about people pretty quickly. You can sense from someone like, oh, they're just really open to questions, or they're really open to the Socratic method. So it definitely, I think that is always inspiring, no matter if the person that you're talking to knows more than you or less than you. It's always, I think it just whooshes oxygen into the room when somebody is, willing to talk about like, hey, I don't know about this thing. It's just like somebody opens a window and this flood of air comes in. And you're like, oh yeah, I've always done it this way. But you're right. I don't know the specifics. Let me figure out why. On the flip side, I do think that like, that can be, to be very real. I think there's universes where folks see that, the flexibility and the openness and the curiosity, and they take that as an opportunity to be like, oh, but maybe you don't know as much as you do.
Yes.
And I think especially, being who I am, it can set you back for a moment, but I really do think that like as soon as people that are worth that people that are really gifted and really really good folks that you want to be around long term in a like working buddy situation, they see that as a strength.
Absolutely. And I can tell you, I've never had the pleasure of sitting in a grade with you before, but from the interactions I have had with you and from the opportunities I have had to watch you doing your thing or talking about the things that you're most passionate about and know best, there's actually a natural authority that comes about after having done those like explorations, like month and year after year, so that when it is go time, and I know when you're in the room with your clients or when you're presenting or when the moment is time for the moment is there for decisiveness rather, that's you're able to summon that all the more readily because you have made those deep pondering explorations at length leading up to those moments.
Yeah, I think because even on the technical side, we like to think that like, oh yes, there's the technical and then there's the creative. Well, I think that's a total misnomer because the technical is creative. Order of operations makes a huge difference.
Yes.
In models, just running software effectively, it makes a huge. Those are big. The way I look at it is that the technical side is the kind of macro creative, like you're trying to design systems that do things well on a big level and prioritize the right part of the imaging chain to focus on. A good example would be, I think in a color gamut, we're talking about like choosing a color gamut or making sure that you're transformed, you've mapped properly from you're using a scene referred workflow, making sure that you're going from your camera gamut to your display gamut or final encoding space. It's most important that skin tones look right? Like that's number one. There's cases where edge points can go in one direction or another, but that's a secondary piece of the conversation because we understand, the point of the engineering is to focus on the piece that is that buys you the most amount of relevant information first before you get into gamut edge points. You know what I'm saying? And then on the creative side, the struggle to be creative is actually the opposite because, you can say like, oh, I want to come up with this perfect grade that just like works all the time, but that's not, people don't shoot the same thing all the time. They shoot all sorts of different material. And I think that the artistic creative schema is more about the creativity of the small, where it's like, I made this choice in this scene because in this instance, this.
I think you've just given me a better sort of like thumbnail of what is that properly defined relationship between the creative and the technical than I've been able to come up with before. Where like the technical and the engineering stuff is macro level, like what are the systems and decisions and solutions that we can implement, like shot after shot, show after show, like project after project that are going to put us into the right realm. And then the creative is all about the localized, like, well, no, they shot that over a stop and a half on purpose and that should stick out or whatever the case may be.
Yeah, they wanted that grain or that noise or whatever. Yeah. Right. Yeah, because I think it's like almost criminal to like refer to one as more creative or more technical. I mean, there's a lot of tedium, on the art side. It's, 600 to 900 shots in an hour-long show, and they all need to match, in addition to looking good. So like there's a lot of tedium with making, especially, shows are just getting more and more ambitious. I mean, shoots are getting longer, locations are more, exotic. It's just an incredibly, people expect a lot, viewers expect a lot. And I think that's also exciting. And also in terms of displays too, I think that's, people are like, oh, I feel like I hear a lot from gearheads, like, oh, well, the viewers are just going to have everything set on Vivid. But you know what? My 70-year-old mother in Oklahoma, like one year I went home for Christmas and she was like, Aurora, can you set this? Something's not right with this TV. And I was like, you're right, Mom. It's not. Let me
Something's
fix
wrong.
that. You're right. Something's wrong. Like they know. And I think if you explain things like, hey, this greater contrast ratio means that it's not going to look washed out when your window curtains are open and your kids are running around turning on all the lights like that. And I think explaining it to folks like that, it's like, oh yeah, that's really, that's something that can improve my life too. But it is, because when you get caught up in the specifics, it's not like, this is, this system is superior because I made, this very specific decision. It's like, no, we're trying to improve if you're trying to improve the viewing experience of everybody, you have to look at what, you have to explain like the why, I think, underneath all of it, whether it's the technical or the creative,
Absolutely. And I think you have to be able to do something that I've seen you do really well many times, where you're able to zoom out and give the like a simple, cogent explanation of something to someone who's not an engineer or a technician or an artist, and just say, hey Mom, this is why this is going to look better in terms of image reproduction for you. And that's all like, like everything underneath the surface there is being driven by your technical knowledge. And you could explain like the gamma target or the contrast ratio or whatever else under the hood that's driving that mechanism, but you're explaining it in a palatable way so that the person on the other end can actually understand and benefit from those systems and that information.
Yeah, I really try to. I think that comes from, I was told growing up, like, I'm a girl from Oklahoma, like, I've definitely been in several situations where people are like, well, what do you have any interest in math for, you pretty little thing? And it's like, wow, I mean, I love it. It's the language of the natural universe. And I was like, such a late bloomer. I didn't take an advanced math course until I was like 23 years old. Like I took as little math as possible in high school. I didn't, take pre-calc again until, after college at community college. But it, I think that has always like really lit a fire under my ass to just anytime someone is like, why do I have to do this, to never talk down to them and always explain like, look, it's complex, but the pieces aren't hard. So let me explain it to you. And it's going to probably take me a moment to sort of ramp up to the big picture macro reason why this thing is the way it is. But I will let you know when I'm at the important part of the story. But I do, like, when I'm explaining, every time one of my friends gets a new TV, they're like, oh, you calibrate it for me? And I'm like, okay, well, I don't have my probe, but here's what I'm doing here and this, and I use this mode because I prefer to go down before I go up. And then like, it's, and then I always have to preface it with like, okay, I'm going to do that. I can't stop myself from doing a little bit of the technical part, but I will kind of ring a bell when I'm ready for you to listen to the part that's important. I just, and that it's also true. The more you explain the basics, the better you get it yourself, right? Like if you tell yourself, oh, like, no, I don't need to explain, like, you should just understand this. It's like, yeah, but do you remember? Because when was the last time, was the last time you actually like looked at a gamma curve, like what it actually looks like? What's the difference between a gamma curve and a power law? So there's no reason to be embarrassed for going like, oh yeah, this stuff is complex, but it's digestible. I just have to continue to remember to, like polish each level of the ladder so I can see it when I'm climbing back down in the dark. And
Explain it to me like I'm 5 is the ultimate test of if you really understand something. If you can
Yeah.
explain it to someone like they're 5, you understand it. And if you can't, like, I can't tell you how many, like, in my role, like, doing educational initiatives, it's always the dirt simple questions that just knock me on my ass. Like,
Mm-hmm.
well, gee, I don't actually know how to answer that because it's so fundamental. I've been assuming I've had underlying assumptions surrounding it for so long that I've really got to think about that for a minute.
Yes, a big one for me was why is the CIE chromaticity diagram two-dimensional when it's representing XYZ values?
Oh
It took,
God, yeah.
yeah, like, so it's an abstraction, right? It's just, you know, x, little y, little z, they all equal 1. You actually have the information what z is in that XY diagram because you just take x and y and subtract them from 1, and the leftover is z. But that's something that, like, I had like a major light bulb moment when I was like, oh, it's normalized. Got it. Okay. And
Yeah.
like I feel like I had asked that question of people before, and it was like, we don't quite understand that. Everyone was like, well, it's the, you know, it's an it's a XY chromaticity diagram. What do you want?
I think a really good example of finding an outer wrapper to, like, simply but succinctly explain a very complex subject is something I'm really excited to talk about. Your color compass, color order system that you published a paper on is in the SMPTE journal, right? In 2019?
It was at the conference 2020, and it will be in an upcoming journal. I don't remember what month, but
Gotcha.
I think it's sometime between now and December.
Gotcha. I mean, so tell us a little bit about the sort of like key insights and concepts that we're going to find in that paper.
Yeah. So the color compass is, I call it color navigation system. So it's a little bit different than a color order system. A color order system is designed to refer to, in most cases, absolute values.
Mm-hmm.
So Munsell would be the most famous color order system. Another old classic one would be Ostwald. And then, of course, going actually. The natural color order system,
Yep.
another one. And the point of all of these systems is, in a lot of cases with these systems, the point is to specify, like, color chips for physical media manufacturing, so paint colors, textiles, that sort of thing. But what I wanted to do was design a system that allowed creatives to be, well, you know, I've gone on and on just now about, like, oh, we shouldn't call just artists creatives and blah, blah, blah. So anyway, I wanted to design a system that allowed production folks, people that don't have a technical background, to talk about specific shifts. And I thought that this would be especially applicable in the world of HDR and multiple color target deliveries with multiple color targets. So it's based on the idea of opponency, which is represented in a lot of color spaces or color schemes. So C-Lab, right? You have an A star and a B star axis. What is, you know, approximately a green magenta axis and a yellow blue axis. There are others too. They're different, like, right? Like, they're,
Yeah.
you know, some of them have, it's like the actual poles would be, and by the way, the opponency part is based on human vision too. That's one of the reasons that anecdotally I have been told by folks at RIT that this is a reason why when they give participants in experiments color opponency controls, they find that they're able to get pretty good matches. Again, it's anecdotal, but I still think is pretty cool.
Yeah.
But anyway, if we think back to, like, trichromacy theory of vision, right? Which is true. Red, green, and blue cones in your eyes. You got your red, green, and blue. So going backwards, long, long, medium, and short. Cone responses. Those responses put together give you a broad spectrum coverage of the visible spectrum. However, there was another theory of vision, which is opponency theory, and that is that you have that yellow, blue, and green, green, red. Green, red, green, magenta. Well, in that version, it's green, red. Anyway, so those signals, it's not so eventually those two models were combined, and we now understand that the opponency part of vision happens in your brain after the cones have collected all the spectral data and converted it into electrical signal. It's put back together in your brain in terms of red, green, yellow, blue, and then luminance as well. So that's why it's such a powerful way of thinking, right? This, opponency, thinking in terms of the practice as like a craftsman or an artist that's trying to describe, or even a QC professional too, that's trying to describe like, hey, I think this color is shifting a little bit. Because when we talk about, and I organize the system mostly to talk about hue, because, when we talk about describing hue differences, I think the most common thing people say is like, oh, that's too warm or that's too cool. Yeah. But if you kind of circle back to this opponency idea where there's something close to a red green or a magenta green or a red blue green axis, red is warmer than green, most people would say. Yellow is warmer than blue, most people would say. But then if you're able to kind of revise your thinking a little bit and change it from like, oh, it's just warmer or cooler, like tungsten is warmer than daylight, 3200 Kelvin to 5600 Kelvin, you can address a little bit more nuance. So when somebody says like, hey, the skin tones are too warm, they might mean they look too gold and yellow and sallow, or they might mean they look too red and ruddy and blotchy. So the point of the system is to be able to point people in general vague terms, and that's why in the model I have north, south, east, and west, like a compass. And if you can imagine at due north, that would be reddish. At west, you would have yellowish. At south, you would have greenish, and at east, you would have bluish. And again, the reason that it's vague and there are big terms like that is because in these specific models, which like you could just heard me a moment ago be like, I can't remember what this other one was or what the specific, axes, those specified colors are. So in this world, it allows someone that's just viewing a picture to go like, hey, that's too north warm. I want it to be more west warm instead. And it seems to have been very helpful. I did some experiments in summer of 2020. Yeah, summer of 2020. And I worked with 4 different colorists. And the way the experiments worked was that I had a standard image that it was shot during the height of the pandemic in tents in my front yard with some, color swatches and a variety of different skin tones. I think that's very important when talking about these systems that are supposed to improve skin tones. Arguably one of the most important storytelling elements. Anyway, side note. So I had these standard images shot, nothing fancy, just like debayered according to manufacturer best practices. And then I created basically some common 6-vector shifts. So I had an image with a red shift, a magenta shift, a blue shift, a cyan shift, so on and so forth. What I did was I sent the standard image and what I called the artistic image, the creative interpretation, to some viewers, and they had all sorts of different backgrounds. I don't remember how many viewers I had. It's been a while since I looked at the specifics. But anyway, I had them all describe in free-form vocabulary what they thought the differences were between the standard image and the creative image. And then I also had them describe I had them watch a short little intro video and read some instructions, and then try and use the color compass to describe how they thought the images shifted. And then I sent those images and the instructions to 4 different colorists, and I was like, tell me what you think. Like, here's the instructions, just do what you think is right. And what I found was, then I used actually a display difference metric to measure the differences that they ended up with between, so I used delta EITP.
Like a delta E, yeah.
Yeah, delta EITP to measure the difference between where the original creative image and then where the recreated creative image, where the difference was between those. And I found that that 64% of the images, the image using the color compass language had a smaller delta EITP than the freeform vocabulary.
Wow.
So I did, do some work to try and just make sure it wasn't just like a
cool idea.
A cool idea, I think it's a really the main difference between the system that I have and a mathematical model is a mathematical model only needs 3 dimensions to be 3-dimensional. That sounds so stupid. Anyway, they only need 3 dimensions to adequately represent these colors mathematically. But my system is 4 dimensions because I count. So we have the north, south, east, west of the compass. Mm-hmm. So that's 2 dimensions. 2 axes, north, south, east, west, and then I have an axis for brightness, and I call that altitude. So a darker image we'll call a lower altitude image, and a brighter image we'll call a higher altitude image. And the 4th element is
chroma, saturation.
Yep.
Whatever that.
Expansion, contraction. Thank you. It's early. I haven't had a coffee. So anyway, expansion, contraction is the 4th one. But the big difference between my system that's intended just for people talking is the 4th, the 2 different hue axes, which is not mathematically necessary for describing colors, but seems to be very helpful in terms of actually describing. And I've used this with clients too, by the way. I think this is again, it's all about skin tones for me, man. It's all about that's the most important piece of a picture is do the people look good? Do they look like they're healthy?
Absolutely. I mean, I know this was your intention in sharing this system, but I have completely adopted it in my work, and that's
rad, awesome.
I mean, it's fascinating to hear the amount of I had no idea that you conducted that level of experimentation and analysis to actually prove out some of the ideas in there. But I knew the first time I read the paper when you were kind enough to share it with me, that it was filling a really important sort of middle ground between I've always felt this tension in my practice in terms of discussing things with, as you mentioned, people who maybe don't necessarily come from a technical background, or they're not working with images and thinking about red, green, and blue all day, every day. Is on one hand, you have warm or cool, and everybody understands and speaks that. But as you pointed out, that does not mean the same thing in different contexts or to different people.
Yeah.
And although everyone will tell you that's one of the go-to verbal cues that people will use of oh, it feels too cool. And then on the other side, you have red, green, and blue, where usually people will be less shy, but even when they use oh, it's a little too green, in my experience, most people who aren't working in our world day in and day out may or may not actually be able to to use your analogy, to navigate the 3D red, green, and blue space very well. So they may say, it's too red, but really it's too yellow, for example, or it's too green, but really it's too teal or cyan. So what's so great about your system is it fits so nicely in between those two things of we're going to be a little more specific and meaningful than warm, cool, but we're not going to ask you to navigate the red, green, blue, full space, without any compass or without any bearing. And I found it to be so helpful for anyone who doesn't just sit at a control surface and paint images all day long. It's such a
I'm
such a
so
well
glad.
implemented idea.
Thank you. I'm really glad to hear that. Yeah, I think it's, like I said, the system was designed that it's not, even the brightness element, calling that altitude, for, low light images versus higher light images, because, brightness and lightness are two different things.
Right.
Colorfulness and chrominance are two different things. And I get confused about this vocabulary and I study it like all the time. I'm
Yeah,
like
same here.
literally thinking about it all day, and I still like have to stop and be like, lightness is the relative one. Yeah. Brightness is the absolute one. Yeah. Is that right? Is that right? Yeah. That's so,
Yeah.
like it every time. It's like some people have a hard time with left and right. Some people,
Yeah.
or what starboard and port, like you're not going to remember that unless you're driving the boat every day. So it's just intended as a system to help people that don't drive the boat tell you where they want to go, because that is important. Because in terms of the taste, there is no right answer.
Right.
If somebody says if a client says to me, that's too warm, I don't like, that doesn't feel like it's sunset. It feels like it's sunrise. I'm like, yeah, okay. And then the other finding from the paper was asking questions about the area that they're referring to is incredibly helpful. Like, well, I don't, again, this is like one experiment with 4 colorists. So this is all small scale data points. But I did find another possibility for the reason in the improvement between the delta E's, is between the freeform instructions and the color compass instructions. I asked people to talk about the skin tone now, talk about
Yeah.
the background, talk about the colored lights that you see in the frame. So I think that's the other, I hope that's another big takeaway for anybody that uses it, is like, oh, ask questions. Like really just like, if somebody tells you that's too warm, ask, do you mean north warm or west warm? And then you can get clarification and just move closer to what they want. Because, that it is a funny job being a colorist, because like we're doing all these like artistic ideas, but ultimately, I mean, I don't feel like it's my place to make decisions. That's what the photographers do, and that's what the showrunners do. And my place is to make the best version of what they want. So I have no business saying like that's not what a warm day should look
Yeah.
like. I have my business is to find out what type of warm day they want. They're trying to communicate, and then we go do that.
That leads me to a really interesting question. So in that, on that subject of like ultimately being an interpreter rather than like an arbiter of
Yeah.
the creative vision, or the way an image should go, do you, like when you're sitting in there and you're working on a grade for a show or a film or whatever you're working on, do you have a take in your back pocket in case like you're asked, or you feel like there's no direction and it needs to be given some? Or are you really just kind of flowing with what you're handed? What is that? Is there any kind of like balance there for you of like bringing a take versus just being a guide to other people's vision?
My take more than anything is to, before anyone has sat down, try and make every single edit point disappear so that scene is just smooth like butter. And I am so the way I work, I am so fastidious. I like my stuff to be organized. I know where all of my trims are going to go. I know where any modeling that I'm going to put on top of, any shapes that I did just to correct somebody getting outside of their light or whatever. That is my, that is how I do it. Is like I get in there and to be non-destructive, like read the negative properly, set up a smooth as butter experience, hopefully from, shot 1 to shot end, and then whatever choices that they want to make on top of that, it's like a dance. Like it's like, oh, well, let's try this, let's try that. That's what allows me to be so flexible and feel like, oh, it's such an organic, wow, this room is like, it's just so fun to just paint all day. And it's like, yeah, because I, like really hauled ass before you got here. That's how I do it. It's like,
Oh, I love that.
yeah, it's like woman behind the curtain, pay no attention. I don't, I want it to feel easy in the way that I want the exploration of the color palette to feel easy. And the way I do that is by not letting anybody see my little duck feet, shake under the water.
Well, I feel like a lesson that I hear over and over again from all the colorists who I admire and get the chance to ask about their craft is that thing of like, work hard behind the scenes so that it can all be easy when everybody's in the room together.
Yep. And then it's just fun, like I don't find that, that when somebody's like, that look is like not, I want to try something else. I don't find that stressful at all, because it's like, oh, great. Like, a new idea that we can try here together. That the process of iterating is not, it's not, it is always nice beforehand when you get a chance in pre-production to be like, this is the look, this is the intention, like we're going into this, production design is working with this palette too, this is what we want to preserve. But I think that that's pretty common, that most people are, I hope more and more departments are like, listen, this is the direction that we want to move this whole giant endeavor, and everybody walk together.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I mean, that leads me to another question I was dying to ask you about your process for when you do get productions in ahead of time, prior to like, all right, we got to master the images and get them out the door. Like when you get a little bit of lead time to develop something, what does your look development process look like?
Yeah, I do spend a lot of time sitting and staring. Before anybody gets in, I do like to have a couple of different options. I think before it usually starts with like the DP, we just talk on the phone about, or in person. Do you remember that, in person?
Yeah, those days.
Saying like, this is the type of, I love hearing what type of lensing people are using, because I think that's really helpful to know, like, hey, we think this glass is beautiful and it's the right speed, but it's a little too clean, so if we could do something about that, or like, hey, I really like the sensor because of how sensitive it is, but like, again, like I want it to feel a little dirtier, or like this is an old vintage lens, and like we want it in our kit, so we want this to match. Knowing those things, those big choices about the whole imaging system, I think is really, that's like kind of where it starts. And then hopefully too, it's awesome to get like lookbooks that's like, here's the feeling that we're going for, because I think that those those like really amorphous words about like, here's what I want you to feel. I've heard this like great Neil deGrasse Tyson quote where he's talking about like, when it comes to artists, like if you're painting a picture of like, space, an event horizon, say like an event horizon of a black hole, like I don't really want to know what it actually looks like. I want to know what it feels like. And so I love notes like that too. And then, so once we've had that conversation, and there's decisions too about like what codec are they going to shoot, and like what, like I said, what sensor did they, what camera body they picked. When we get into setting a look before a show, there's a question of, are they going to have a DIT on set? And usually the answer is yes. So in some cases, we will just give them our, because we're very open about that at Arsenal, where it's always like, oh, you want our color transform? You got it. Like you can put CDLs on top of it. Like that's awesome. But when it comes to developing a specific look, I like to, hopefully I have a camera test that I can work on a little bit before 5 people come in to sit down and all share their pressing thoughts. I like having like around 4 options of, here's what I think is appropriate for the story. Here's a version that's very different than that. Here's a couple of versions that are kind of plays off of the same topic. Like if it's a love story, for example, or a family drama or something like that, I might want to start with something that I think is appropriate for that emotional tone in terms of contrast. And then I just I feel like I've got, you know, a lot of different building blocks to start from. And that way when they come in, I don't like to show people a whole bunch of options, like just one after another, because I feel like it confuses folks. I like to hear again from people with their words, like, what were you thinking here? Like, what do you, you know, what do you feel like is most appropriate? And usually you'll get a pretty good description. People will be like, well, like really snappy and like a really, you know, really intense, like gritty, or like, I want this to feel like a street photographer took it. And you're like, okay, all right. So what is, and then from there, I usually, like, as they're describing, like, you know, they come in, they sit down, it's like they're describing kind of what they like, and I'm like, okay, cool. And at that point I can usually pick the one that I think is like the closest starting point, and I like to just let them talk and, you know, jam on it for a little while and see if I can come up with something that's even better, based on how they direct me. I like being able to just react. It's like jazz.
Yeah. That's so cool. And in terms of, and you remind me, you're on Luster, is that right?
I am. We just switched to Resolve.
Oh, okay.
So I had been on Luster for the last long time.
Yeah.
And, you know, I've used Resolve previously and Baselight and back to Resolve. So we're back into that color set, tool set. And, you know, to me, they're all, I feel like I'm gonna make a lot of people mad, but they're just, you know, it's just tools. Like,
Just show me where the gearbox is, man.
Yeah, you know, like I need the trackballs, and like I need some nuance when it comes to adjusting tone. I prefer that to not be with a curve. Usually, I like having different, you know, knob adjustments instead, and that's you know, that's it. Whichever one stays stable, and you know, lets me play back well, and allows me to have allows me to organize my tools in a very specific shape. That was like the first thing that I did was like, okay, I need a node tree. What do I want this to look like?
Yes.
So, because in Luster, it's very, you know, you had your 48 secondaries, and they're always in the same place. So it's very easy to be incredibly efficient. And in Resolve, it's like, well, what do you mean? I could put this anywhere, and it doesn't always like, it's not always labeled this, and wow. So that was the first thing I did in that switch, was just to be like, I need my plan. Thank you.
You need your sandbox. You need your defined workspace.
Yeah.
Totally makes sense. And I'm curious I want to come back to Resolve if we have time, but I was also curious to ask in terms of like the implementation of the overall look as you are cultivating it with the creative stakeholders. What form does that end up taking? You mentioned, you know, using trackballs and kind of primaries adjustments, but are you at the end of it, like when you do sort of slot the components of your look into Rory's hyper-organized node tree, what are those pieces? Is it like a creative contrast curve, like a creative gamut of sorts? Like what are the concepts and like the implementations that end up ultimately arising from that look dev process?
It really depends on the look, but I like a clean primary grade, honestly. I just think
Interesting.
that just to keep a good, and I don't mean clean like no color bias. I just like
Sure.
I want my primary grade to be as simple and effective as possible. That's where it really starts for me. It's just like a good lift, gamma, gain, good balance. Not, you know, not a lot of, I don't like to swing curves around until like I feel like I've just let the image be itself before I start distorting stuff. I feel like there's certain things that are pretty common in terms of people wanting to stay filmic and not so digital. You know, video green still a thing, for example, and like, you know, not wanting blues to be too punchy on the Venice. That seems to be pretty common. But yeah, my actual tree where my you know, and it like if there's like a wash or a split tone thing, it may be a couple of different nodes that are layers where the adjustment is kind of built in different pieces for the sake of order of operations. Like, well, I want to roll the highlights warm, but I want to keep them not so clippy, but I don't want to, the order of like whether I'm going to do like a soft clip before I introduce warmth into highlights could vary depending on what the goal is.
Sure.
And then there's always my work are at Arsenal. We're always in a log-based workflow. It's something that is akin to having an output transform that's been built that has a counterpart, a bit easy to swap out to make the transition to HDR easy peasy. So
Right.
that's always a part of it, no matter what. Making sure the output transforms, correct, is always a part of it. And
Yeah. So
package has been designed.
Sure. So you're always like color managed, working in a nice big wide gamut, wide dynamic range working space, and then targeting your intended display.
Yep, that's it.
That's the jam.
Yeah,
That's the jam. Oh, how cool. Well, I could talk for 3 more hours, but I wanted to at least touch on another paper you published called Beyond Better Pixels, where you were talking about the perceptual and emotional sort of like ramifications of HDR, which is also like a very great distillation of a very big complex subject. I wonder if we could talk about that for a minute. If you would just tell us kind of like what's the TLDR of your HDR paper?
Yeah, TLDR, the input that you put into a function determines what kind of effect the function is going to have on the whole project. That's it. Like that's the short version. Is like what I discovered. We had 3. That paper had there were 3 shows in production roughly the same time. They were all using the same output transform. So and again, like the output transform is both a very creative part of the process and also a very standard thing, right? Like if you have if you have a transform that you're like, oh, I can really reliably repeatably and reliably, that's the thing I'm always saying, can I do it repeatably and reliably? If I have an adjustment that can make these shows stylistically look different easily with the same output transform, we're going to do it. Like if we like the way it's archiving well and it's handling tone mapping well, then let's just keep with it. But anyway, I had we had 3 shows that were all using the same output transform, all delivering an HDR pass and an SDR pass. I measured the key side of the face to the fill side of the face in both SDR and HDR for each show. And what I found was, depending on the contrast ratio of the show, that affected what the transform process did to the skin tone on a per show basis. So for example, if you have a really bright image of somebody like flying through the sky, you might have an image with really hot, like say, I don't know, it's like a really, sun blasting on their face, like 60 IRE or something like that on the key side and 50 IRE on the fill side. If you go to HDR, you might have an instance where both the key side and the fill side of the face get brighter. Meanwhile, if you have, kind of more like a traditional half moon, modeling situation where it's a little bit more, contrast, you might have, by doing that HDR transform process, the key side of the face might get brighter and the fill side might get darker. So in that case, you may have a higher contrast ratio there. And then in a low key setting, you might have, say, a really intimate scene with somebody at a candlelit table. You might have the key side of the face and the fill side of the face. If they're on the really low side, you might find that both of those values get darker in HDR. Because one thing that people forget is that, we have a higher peak luminance level, but also darker shadows. And that's the thing that can be so powerful, is that you can end up with higher contrast in a lower light image, just because of statistically there's more contrast in a deeper shadow a mid-tone value than there would be between like two very bright highlights, like a high highlight and then like a slightly less high highlight next to each other. So that's not TLDR at all. But anyway, the real discovery was that like, you can really, what the starting image, the starting signal that you are working with is going to change your pipeline. So you better pick a pipeline that's appropriate for your starting image.
Man, I have to tell you, like, when I like kind of groped my way into a much fuzzier version of that realization a couple years ago of like, wait, so you're telling me that within this like idealized, like color managed, target whatever display you're headed to and don't worry about matching cameras or displays nearly as much as in the good old display referred telecine days. Within that realm, there's actually, as you just pointed out, like a huge like creative subjective component to the output transform, and like it can change the character of what is actually rendered visible based on what we pipe through it, and that may require altering one or both of those components in order to achieve what we want. Like, man, that's a little overwhelming.
Yep. I think that's how you really see like a badass expert in the field of HDR, is that there's someone that's like comfortable sitting there in all the swimming chaos that is different surrounds and different displays and different shows, and they're like, well, guess what? I gotta deal with all of it. So, I'm here to do it. Like
I'm here. I'm surfing.
Yeah, I'm just like, that's how the people that are like, just comfortable with the uncertainty of cosmic Tumblr is like, you know what? What are you gonna? It's
That's
just a chaotic universe. That's how you know you're really good at it. If you're just like, yeah, it's chaos.
Oh man, I think you're right. I had another a colorist friend mention the other day that like I think their own expression of what you just said, of like just getting comfortable with all of that uncertainty, of saying like, yeah, like the days of like, that's my show, like what I'm looking at on this display in this room right now, that's my show. It's not really a thing anymore. It's like, that's one portal into my show. Like there's a spectrum that my show occupies in terms of like the different screens and viewing conditions that it's in. And yeah, I'm trying to like give a meaningful lens into it in all of those environments. But the days of like, here is the show, I think those may be behind us.
Yeah, I use the phrase relational color a lot, is that I want the relationships of color within the frame to be meaningful no matter what the display that someone's looking at it are.
Right.
I want it to be good decisions about like, is this person's skin tone too green for this environment? I feel like those are the types of decisions that are most translatable given the chaos of the viewing options for the end user.
Absolutely. And it's so funny because one of the fun aspects of getting ready for this conversation with you, so I was like, oh, let's like, I've seen a lot of your work before, but like, let's do a refresh. Like, let's check out Counterpart. And I put it on like in my, I've got my nice displays in my workspace, but down in the living room, I'm like every other American. Like maybe I've got a slightly better tuned system, but it's not calibrated display. So I'm like, let's put it on. And relational color is a great way to describe that. Like I, as a professional, can still put on whatever the piece of content is and be like, oh, this went through the shop of a very skilled practitioner, or like, oh, this person wasn't there, and like I can watch Counterpart or any of your other work, and while you would probably like grimace looking at that compared to what the image that you mastered, the relational color still holds up. Like there's a strong enough foundation there and emphasis on the right priorities such that the images still work in that suboptimal viewing environment.
Yeah, I think really the only place where people get like truly fucked up is when you have multiple displays next to each other. Like if,
oh God.
Like I like when I went back when we used to go to bars in the olden days, like, you go to a happy hour and there'd be like 3 screens like in the bar or whatever. That type of thing still makes my teeth just like hurt. Oh, it's like, yeah. It's hard because it's like, I don't know where to look. And like, that's it's that type of thing I think is worse than, a display that's a little bit off, because you have mechanisms in
Yeah,
your eyes and
compensating
your
mechanisms.
brain that are gonna, help you a little bit. Like, and also think that some of those mechanisms can be used as a creative tool. For example, chromatic adaptation. So if you have like a really cool scene, and then you really want to, a hard cut, um, going into the next scene warm by virtue, depending on how cool, how
Yes.
saturated your cones were, it may be like, whoa, like an extra shock to your system because of the chromatic adaptation, the re re-leveling. I'm forgetting the right word. That's a,
I never knew it, but I know exactly
I
what
know
you're
it's
describing.
on the tip of my tongue, but so like, sorry, any color scientists listening.
Yeah. Did you happen to read that? There was that recent article in Wired about the way Pixar leverages image science, and I think the exact mechanism that we're talking about in the way they design the color in their films and the way they grade them.
I have listened to Dominic before, and I do remember hearing a piece about, I think it's Inside Out is the one where in HDR they use the bright, like it's like in the beginning of, sorry, spoilers, but like as you're watching the movie and the kid is being born, you go from like dark to like a full on HDR
Yes.
peak signal as like a very physiological experience. Yeah, and I think that's just so cool. I think that's very creative. It's funny because I think that the HDR world, it's like extremely exciting, but also I think that the types of decisions that are really exciting are subtler like that. Like, you're not going to blow people's eyeballs out with birth light unless you have a birth scene, like then it's
Right.
appropriate. But like in a lot of cases it's just like, oh, this is more, this is really, this is just going to hold up in a greater variety of surrounds more than anything else. Because like that's the dream for me. It's like, I want kids watching YouTube rehashes of Counterpart or In Treatment or whatever show on YouTube on their phones on the bus, to be like, yeah, this is a cool looking show, I'm gonna go home and watch the rest of it. Like, that's what I want. It's like I think because that's the magic of TV, of episodic and streaming. It's like the democratization of these like great long form stories that I really dig it.
Oh, for sure. Well, you just led me to the last question I want to ask you before I give you your day back about where are we going with all this stuff? Like, do you have a perspective on like where we are in the history of motion imaging and where it's going from here?
No, I'm just a pixel pusher. No,
I just
I
work
mean,
here.
I don't find that I can like think about question. Well, I mean, like, I guess that's not exactly true. Like, the whole reason I designed the color compass is like because it was like I just want people to be able to talk better.
Yeah.
Honestly, I think the next, I would imagine that, and it is already a thing, is like ambient light sensors. I've always thought that if they're, because field of view changes your perception of contrast and saturation and brightness as well. So I've also thought that it would be really badass if someday there's some metadata tag that can include like the size of my mastering display and describe the relationship between, like, okay, so I was watching on a whatever inch mastering display, and this person is watching on a projector. Like, so here's the whatever equation, the function that's going to describe how much contrast needs to increase to keep that relationship the same as what I'm viewing in the bay. I think that'd be
Oh
super cool.
yeah. Yeah. Get some of those like observer formulas into
Yeah,
it.
somebody do that, please. I think that'd be really neat. But in terms of the creative part, like, no, I think I like to do is I just I do hope that the trend of more and more diverse storytellers being able to tell more and more different looking stories is, I think that's incredibly value on like a human level.
Yeah.
That's what excites me. I hope that, I do hope that onset monitoring, onset in HDR continues to be accessible to folks. I think that like revealing some of the flaws in high end values is really, really useful to photographers, and it gives them more control. So I'm all about that. But I just want more, just a continuous flood of shows, more stories, more people telling the stories, more people that don't look like us, that look like not just more diversity of folks in charge. I think that's exciting too. And also, again, a thing that I think could be helped by HDR is subtle representations of difference, not in just values of skin tones, like, darker or lighter or medium or whatever, but undertones too, because I think that conversation can kind of get shortchanged sometimes. And I think it's really special when you get to really dive deep into like the specifics of stories and people and what makes them look the best.
I couldn't agree with you more. I feel like that's maybe the most exciting, like, fertile territory when you're doing an HDR masters. Like, what are we going to do? Like, actually still in or near that 100 nit area, but like, what are we going to do in there that we just couldn't do in an SDR paradigm? And specifically when it comes to representation and like getting different, like faces and hues and like contrast ratios and all these kind of things in terms of the way that we depict people. There's so much more room for doing interesting things than has been done traditionally in SDR.
Yeah, subtle but expansive.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, man, Rory, I want to thank you so much for a really exciting conversation and for being like teaching me a bunch of new stuff in this conversation and a bunch of stuff prior to, and I'm sure I'm going to continue to learn from you. So I'm just very grateful to count you as a peer and get to chat with you about all of this exciting color stuff.
Yeah, it's super fun. You may see me chiming in on some of the forums I'm learning MATLAB right now because I'm trying to like really get into like, how does this work? This matrix math?
Oh, I'm jealous. You're beating me to it. I want to get there too.
Yeah, it's really hard. I have a very demanding full-time job, so it's going very slowly, but it's good to ask questions. It's good to be curious about things that don't immediately pay off.
Oh, it sure is. That's the best parting advice I could think of. Let's keep asking difficult questions and being patient with unrooting the answers.
Yes, and painting too. You should come out plein air sometime.
Yes.
Total flip side.
Oh my God, that's a whole other conversation about your color time and all of your other like incredibly interesting sort of side pursuits that are still related to color. Like, we could have a whole other chat about that stuff. I'm sure. I want to hear more.
Yeah, it's fun stuff. It's relaxing.
Maybe for the next one.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Rory. Have a great rest of your day, and I'm sure we'll speak again very soon.
Thank you. You too. See you later. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. Bye-bye.